This conference will now be recorded.
Hi friends, good morning. In this Azure Databricks Master Program, in today's session, we are going to talk about Azure Databricks concepts. Okay, these concepts are very important because we are going to use all of these concepts. Okay, right. Let's see in what we are going to learn in today's session. We are going to learn interface. Okay, what are the different ways we can able to access Azure Databricks? We are going to talk about. Then we are going to talk about what is workspace. Okay, and what all things we will have in workspace. Then we are going to talk about data management. Okay, what are the different options we have to manage our data in a Databricks file system. Then computational management. Computation means cluster. Okay, what are the different types of clusters we have, when we are going to use what type of cluster, and who is going to create these clusters, we are going to talk about in computation management. Then model management. Suppose if you have a machine learning, okay, machine learning models, how you are going to implement those models, how you are going to run those things, then how you are going to visualize the results. So all those things we are going to talk about model management. Then we are going to talk about authentication and authorization. Suppose if you want to access any notebook, okay, what kind of permissions we have, how you are going to control the access. All those things we are going to talk about in a authentication and authorization. Okay, so these are the concepts we are going to discuss. It's a little bit theory, so that's why it will take more time, and if you have any questions in the middle, please feel free to ask. Okay. Okay, what is the interface? See, interface is that Azure Databricks support for accessing your assets. Okay, interface is nothing but a, we are the users, Databricks is the product. Now, to access Databricks, okay, I want to access Databricks. Now I need some interface. What is the interface? What are the different interfaces we have which we can use to access Databricks? Okay, there are three options we have, as I mentioned earlier. One is UI, second one is REST API, third one is CLI. Okay, let's see. First one is user interface, UI. Okay, that is nothing but Azure Databricks UI provides an easy to use. So if you look at, if you ask anybody, so are you comfortable in working on UI or with the CLI or REST API? Most of the people, they will prefer UI, because instead of remembering those CLI commands and submitting, the easiest thing is we can able to work with Databricks by using user interface. Okay, so it will be very easy to use. Graphical interface to workspace folders and their combined objects, meaning suppose whatever data we are organized into folders, whatever notebooks, whatever code we have organized, we kept it in a folders. All those things we can able to check it as a graphical interface, isn't it? Because we will clearly see from the UI, okay, this is the folder, Databricks master program folder, this is the BI master program folder. So very clearly we can able to visualize those things, and we can able to click based on whatever you need. Okay, and in these folders, what we are going to keep is, we are going to keep data objects and computational resources like cluster creation. See, you can able to organize your basically code, then you can organize your data, then you can able to maintain your clusters, everything you can able to do it from the UI. From UI, it will be easy for us to access Azure Databricks. That is first point. Second point is, from UI, you can able to manage. Okay, you can able to manage and interact with all your code, and you can interact with your data, and you can able to check all the cluster, you can interact with your cluster. So all these things you can able to do very easy with Azure Databricks user interface. Okay, by using user interface, we can able to access all of this. Let's go for the next one. Next one is the REST API. Okay, so REST API, I will show you how you can use. Basically, REST API you can use to cancel the jobs and all those things. Basically, we were using, but I will show you REST API as well. I will show, but this will come at the very end of our training. It will not come in the beginning. Remember. Next, the Databricks REST API allows you to programmatically access Databricks. So here it's a completely UI. It will be easy for most of us to work, but it's a REST API is a programmability. Okay, programmatically you are going to access the Databricks. Okay, Databricks REST API interface is a programmatically access Databricks instead of going through the web UI, instead of going through the user interface. What we are doing is we are accessing the Databricks programmatically. There are two types of REST APIs we have. One is 2.0 and second one is 1.2, but both are having a similar properties, but some enhancements they have done in 2.0. Okay, see here. Use the REST API 2.0 for cluster and library management, and support for the 1.2 cluster management and library management API ended on December 31st, 2017. What it means is, whatever REST API you are using, REST API 1.2, by using that REST API 1.2, you cannot create cluster, you cannot install any libraries from December 31st, 2017. But now it's a 2020, so REST API 1.2 is no longer available. So you just focus on a REST API 2.0. So we are also going to focus on a REST API 2.0 only. Okay, so but ultimately we have a UI which is very easy to access, and REST API programmatically you are going to access Databricks. Finally, yeah, so this is the some, like, you can able to understand this is how the REST API URL will look like. Okay, Databricks instance name, see API 2.0. Here you see the version is 2.0, REST API 2.0. Okay, see here what I am trying to do is I'm just getting the clusters list, all the clusters which I have in my Databricks. I'm trying to get it by using this particular URL. Okay, next, CLI. So an open source project hosted on GitHub, the CLI is built on top of REST API 2.0. So how to install CLI is pip install Databricks-CLI. So this is the command you need to use to install the Databricks CLI. But basically whatever you are submitting, whatever commands you are submitting by using CLI, those commands are going to use the REST API in backend. Okay, that's why you see here CLI is built on top of REST API 2.0. Okay, so CLI is backend, it is going to use the REST API 2.0. So whatever commands you are submitting, those will again request, those will access the Databricks with the help of again REST API 2.0, not REST API 1.2. Okay, so finally let me conclude this particular slide. See, there are three different ways we can able to access Databricks. One is UI, second one is REST API, next one is CLI. User interface is the easiest one which you can able to use to access Azure Databricks, code, data, clusters, jobs, everything. REST API also you can use, but it's a programmatically you need to access the Databricks, but this is not a recommended for all the cases. Okay, so but you see some of the things which are not available in UI. Example, canceling the jobs and all those things, you cannot do it directly. So in those cases, we need to go for the REST API 2.0. So we can also use CLI to create the cluster, to upload some data into Databricks, to access, to download some data. So whatever you want to do, you can able to do it by using CLI. Okay, so see, there are some limitation with respect to some of the interfaces. If you look at the UI, you cannot cancel the jobs, you cannot download any data. But if you look at the CLI, you can able to export some of the data by using CLI commands. So basically CLI is in backend, it is using REST API 2.0. Whatever you are doing with the CLI, same things you can able to do it with REST API 2.0. Any questions in this particular slide, friends?
Yeah, one quick question. Whatever you have mentioned here, is there anything which is proprietary to Azure versus AWS, or everything, whatever you have mentioned, is universal?
Exactly, it's a universal. Okay.
Thank you.
Malaya, what is this Azure CLI and this CLI? What is the difference between these two?
Azure CLI. See, Azure CLI is for accessing your Azure resources. Okay, it's a Databricks CLI to access your Databricks assets. Example, Databricks clusters if you want to create, or if you want to create any folders in data management or tab, if you want to create any jobs. Okay, so for anything like to create any notebook, whatever you want to do, everything we can able to do it here. Azure CLI is to access Azure resources. Okay, Databricks CLI is basically to access Databricks.
So it is eventually the same, right? And since this is Azure Databricks, so this Azure CLI will also work same as the CLI, which
No.
is
See here, I am going to install a package here. You see, pip install Databricks CLI. I am going to install because it's a separate. It's separate for your Databricks. That's what I mentioned. This Databricks CLI is developed on top of REST API 2.0. This is totally different. This CLI is only work for your Databricks. You need to install this.
okay. I understand.
Yeah. So don't worry. So see, like every day you are getting a lot of clarity, right? Because I'm going to cover all the things in the same way. CLI, when you see CLI, you will come to know, okay, this is how we are going to access, this is how we are installing Databricks CLI. But yes, you can ask the questions, but I will just, as I said, right, so I'm going to cover a lot of things in the future sessions. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? Okay, if no questions, let me just move on. Workspace, okay, it is very important. Let's focus on this. See, Databricks Workspace is an environment for accessing all of your Databricks assets. Okay, yesterday we have seen Workspace. So in Workspace, we'll have all the link for your uploading the library, for creating the notebook, for creating the cluster, for uploading the data in a Databricks file system. All the links will be there. Okay, so all like Databricks Workspace is an environment for accessing all of your Databricks assets. So you can able to access all Databricks assets because all the links will be available at Workspace. Okay, if you did not remember, I will just show you today as well. Okay, don't worry. Next, the Workspace organizes objects like notebooks, libraries, and experiments into a folders. Okay, notebook is nothing but a code. Library is also a code, which is an inbuilt code, which we are going to get it from some Maven or any other like any other websites. Okay, we are going to download these libraries. Those libraries we are going to use it in our Databricks. And experiments, suppose if you have any machine learning experiments, okay, which you have executed and you have experiments ready, those things also you can able to maintain in your folders. Okay, so what Workspace is doing, it is just organizing all the objects. What are the objects? Notebooks, libraries, and experiments into folders. Okay, so once you have organized all this data into folders, then provides access to data and computational resources such as clusters and jobs. Now this particular code I want to execute on a cluster, and what this code is going to do, this code is going to access the data. So to access the data, to execute this particular code on the to execute, see, I'm just explaining once again, whatever code we have in this folders, that code we are going to submit on the computational resource, that is nothing but cluster. When the code is executing, this code is going to access the data from the Databricks file system, maybe any other storage. Now what happens is, like here in Workspace, we will have some controls. Okay, we can provide access to data and computational resources such as clusters and jobs. Even you can create the jobs and you can create the clusters. So cluster should have access to access the data. So all the related access also we can able to provide it from the Workspace. Next, see, these are the important things. So in Workspace we have a different options. One is, first thing is the dashboard. Okay, dashboard, it's an interface that provides organized access to visualization. Okay, so all the, like, let's say if it is a notebook, you will have some like visuals. Okay, this is the notebook. Next we have something called library, you have a visual. Next we have cluster, you have a visual. So based on what you want, you need to click on that particular option, and that particular option will take you to the respective service respective functionality. Example, if I click on cluster, it will allow you to create the cluster. If you click on data, it will allow you to upload data, or if you want to see what all the data you have already in the data management, you can able to see that. Next, we have a notebooks. Okay, so a notebook is a web-based interface to documents containing a series of runnable cells. Runnable cells are commands. Okay, so I think the better is I can able to show you. Let me just quickly show you all these things, because maybe it will be helpful for you. Because even if I explain theory, if you're not able to understand, it will be difficult. Right? So let's relate each and everything so that my job also will be easy, your job also will be easy if I show you everything. Mishra, please be in mute. Okay, see here what we have. You have all the visuals, right? All the options we have. So based on what you want, you are going to access. Let's say what I will do. I'll just go to Spark SQL joins. Okay. See here, this is what this is basically a, which one I logged in. Oh, I logged in into wrong one. Fine, that's okay. But any Databricks community will work same. See, this is a note. This is called a notebook. Okay. In this notebook, it's basically a series of commands. Okay, you can just execute here. I can say I can just execute something. But this notebook, I'm going to attach to the cluster. You need to have a cluster. To create cluster, you need to go to the cluster and you need to click create cluster, and you are going to create the cluster. Next, go to data management. In data management, you see create table and go to DBFS. Sorry, upload file. Then just directly upload the file from your local system. Okay, so you have a data tab which is going to allow you to upload the data, cluster tab which will allow you to create the clusters. You can able to create the notebooks in a different ways. Just click here, create notebook, you can do. But you see, I have a lot of like already I have a lot of notebooks. Okay, now you understood, right? See, a notebook is a web-based interface to documents containing a series of runnable cells. You just have seen you have a multiple cells, but the recommended number of cells per notebook is 100. If the cells is more than 100, it's not recommended to continue in a same notebook. You can just use other logic in another notebook, but mostly I don't see like any. We have done a lot of complex coding, but I don't see my cells not more than 100. Okay, so if you have really, so don't write all the logic in a single notebook. So each functionality you need to write it in a different notebooks. As we discussed yesterday, you need to call the another notebook from the, you need to call the one notebook from another. Okay, now you see. So it's a notebook is nothing but a runnable cells, series of runnable cells that operates on files and tables, visualization and narrative text. What it is going to do, it is basically what based on your code, those cells may read any file, may read any table. So from that particular cell, whatever data you are getting from that data, you can able to create something, some visualization, some reporting you can do. Okay, you can write any text, anything you can able to do it in that runnable cells. Commands can be run in sequence, referring to the output of one or more previously run commands. We just have seen it's a runnable command, right? Sorry, it's a series of runnable cells or commands. Now what happens? It's not going to execute like, okay, execute the first third command, then execute first command, again execute fifth command. That's how it is not going to execute. Okay, it is going to execute in a sequence, first top to bottom. Okay, from first command it will execute, then it will execute second command, next it will execute third command. If first command failed, second command, third command execution it will skip. Okay, so that's why you need to use exception handling to handle those kind of errors or exceptions. Okay, we are going to talk about those exception handling. But what happens if we have a command 1, 2, 3, command 1 is failed, then you will have command 2, command 3 will be skipped. Okay, next, let's say command 1 is successful. In command 2, when you are executing, you can take the result of command 1 and you can check if the result is equal to true, or if the count is if you are getting some result. Example, I have applied some filter condition. In my filter condition, if the record count is at least 1, then I want to do the further logic. If the record count is 0, I don't want to do, because there is no data. Why I need to run unnecessarily all other cells? So in those cases, what you can do, based on the output which you have received from the first command, you can check that particular, you can take that particular result. With the help of this result, you can decide whether you want to run the second command or not. Okay, that's how you can able to do the notebooks. Okay, next we have a libraries. So libraries also here only you have, you just go here, see libraries, import libraries, whatever you want to do, you can able to do. Okay. Next, library makes third party. Okay, maybe you can just get these particular libraries from the third party or locally built code available to notebooks and jobs running on your cluster. So whatever, if you have developed any code, okay, see, library is nothing but a whatever code you are writing. Okay, what you are going to do is multiple files. You are going to write this code in a multiple files. Maybe let's take an example of Gmail. In Gmail, you have inbox, sent, outbox. Okay, all these options we have. So now what happens in real time is, it's a functionality: inbox functionality, sent functionality, outbox functionality, spam functionality, trash functionality. All these functionalities you are going to develop. So what happens for, just to implement a sent functionality, just to show you all the mails which you have sent in a sent option, we need to write a multiple files. What I will do, all these multiple files, I will keep it in a sent folder. All the files which are related to inbox, I will keep it in a inbox. Now these kind of folders, if we combine, that is nothing but a library. Okay, so this particular library you can develop locally. Okay, locally build the code, or it can be taken from the third party. Mostly what we do is, it's a common scenario, common functionality, right? So common functionality things we are going to get it from the third party libraries. Okay, don't worry, we are going to install a lot of libraries as part of our training. Okay, next, data. So data means you can import data into a distributed file system mounted into Databricks workspace and work with it in Databricks notebooks and clusters. So basically, can we execute multiple notebooks at a time? Yes, you can able to run. Okay, so data, you can import data into a distributed file system mounted into Databricks workspace. We already know what storage we have in data management. Like Databricks file system means what, friends? It's basically blob storage. Okay, already blob storage we have. Now when you are working with the Databricks notebooks and clusters, what these Databricks notebooks and clusters will do, these will access the data which you have in a Databricks file system. You see, you can import data into distributed file system. Let's say whatever data I have uploaded into my distributed file system, that is nothing but a Databricks file system mounted into a Databricks workspace. Okay, that is the, see, whatever blob storage we have that is mounted on a Databricks workspace, that is nothing but finally you can call it as a Databricks file system. Okay, now I have uploaded that particular data into my Databricks file system. Now what I need to do, work with it in Databricks notebooks and clusters. So whatever data you have uploaded, that data I want to read it and I want to process the data. So for that, I'm going to write a code in notebooks and I'm going to execute that code in a cluster. Okay, so but the data is nothing but you can able to store the data in a data management. I will show you that tab also. You can also use a wide variety of Apache Spark data sources to access data. As I mentioned, it's not restricted to only Databricks file system. You can access any other storage like Blob, Gen1, Gen2, SQLDB, SQL Database, Cosmos, AWS S3, Snowflake also we are going to discuss this time. So all those things you can able to access them. Clear? Next, jobs. Jobs are one mechanism for running code or scheduling jobs in Databricks. Now what I wanted to do, so whatever, now just somebody has asked a question. The question is, can we execute a multiple notebooks at a time? Okay, that is the question. So just imagine, now I want to run multiple notebooks at a time. You can just schedule all of those notebooks at once. So all those will execute. Okay. So without manual intervention, I want to run all these notebooks at once. You are going to schedule those notebooks by using a jobs. I'll show you all these things. Okay, quickly come back again. You see here we have a jobs tab for creating the jobs. Okay, so data option we have to upload your data. Okay, now experiments, a collection of ML flow runs for training a machine learning model. So these experiments, it is not available here. Okay, but when we create Azure Databricks, there will be one more tab called model. Okay, there will be one more tab called model. If you go inside model, you can able to see all the experiments. I will show that. I will show you those things. Okay, next. Clear in this particular slide, friends? Any questions here? See, dashboard where you
I
have
have a
every.
question. Can we run all the cells within a notebook in one shot?
Yes, yes. See, those things we will discuss. See, you have options like, you just let me show you. See here, we have some option. Run all cells in this notebook.
Okay.
Understood?
Yeah,
We are going to
Malaya.
detail about all these options. Don't worry. Next.
Yeah, I have
Sudhir.
one. Yeah. So, in first class, you said like we can run these notebooks using ADF also, Azure Data Factory also. Here also we have a jobs. May I know
Yes.
the difference between those?
See, the difference, main difference is what happens in most of the real-time project. We are going to use Azure Data Factory to copy data from on-premise file systems or on-premise databases to the cloud. So once the data is loaded, once that particular execution is finished, I want to run my Databricks notebooks immediately. Okay, so that is what I wanted to. What?
If there is any dependency on others, then we can use ADF. If it is a
Yeah,
standalone,
exactly.
within
Depends on
notebooks
others.
itself.
We don't have something called event-based scheduling in Databricks. Whatever we have is we have only schedule.
Understood.
Okay, so event-based means whenever some new data comes, I want to run, but that thing is not possible in Databricks. That's why we are going with the ADF. Clear, Sudhir?
Yeah, it's clear. Thank you.
No problem.
Malaya, what is this inbox and sent library that you were explaining?
That I was explaining for what is library. Just to explain that, library is nothing but a see. You have a files, whatever code you have written, that is maybe in a Java. If it is a Java, you will just create a .java file. If it is a Python file, .py file you will create. If it is a text file, .text. If it is a CSV, .csv files you will create. So this collection of files is nothing but a package. Okay. Now collection of package is nothing but a library. Just to explain that, I was giving some example from the website. So if you look at Gmail, we have a sent, we have inbox, outbox, all those options. So I'm going to create a multiple files for each functionality. So when I combine multiple files, that is nothing but a package. So now I can say sent is a one package, inbox is a one package, outbox is a one package. When you combine all these packages, you will get the library. That is nothing but a library combining. Okay, group of packages is nothing but a library. So that's what I was explaining, Mr.
Yeah, okay.
Clear, friends? Okay, let me just move on. Data management. Okay, see here, this section describes the objects that holds the data on which you perform analytics and feed into machine learning algorithm. So what happens, whatever data you are going to process, that data basically used by your machine learning for training your model. Okay, I think yesterday also I have given some example, right? Mission is like a completely new baby. Okay, so it's a kid. Mission does not know anything. How you are training, based on that, it is going to give the result. Okay, if you are going and teaching like every day, like what happens, that's what people are saying, right? So you need to just say 5 days or 6 days, you just do some things, mission will understand, okay, this is what I need to do daily, and it will repeat to do same thing. Okay, so some of the like robots came, right? So those are going to operate on a machine learning model. So what those will do, first few days you are going to take that mission every day and you will just to train it. Okay, so first you can do this, then when you just wake up early morning, do first you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then just repeat 4 or 5 times, then next day onwards it will try to do that, but it will forget to do because you have not trained properly. What you need to do, instead of training only 5 days, maybe you train 1 month, so it will remember the things and it will do the things very accurately compared to whatever training we have given in a 5 days. Okay, because as you are training more, you will get the accurate results from the mission. Okay, remember. So now I want to train this mission, but basically let's say I want to train this mission. How you are going to train this mission? With a lot of data you need to set, you need to uh, pass to this mission. This mission will read all this data and it will understand, okay, this is the thing that I need to understand. Okay, example, I'm going to show you one of the use case. You can say, let's say in a bank loan, right? Okay, so bank people, what they will do, they want to identify who is the good customer that we can able to provide the loan. Now what they are going to do, they are going to collect all the information from each customer. Example, whether this customer is a working in other organization, he has his own business, whether he is married or not. Okay, how much income he is getting, next how much loan he is requesting. Okay, what is the tenure, all these things we are going to consider, and what we will do, we will send it to the mission. Okay, now mission cannot do anything because mission did not learn anything. So before you send all this newly requested information to the mission, what you need to do, as of today, without machine learning, as of today, you might have granted, you might have given the loan for a lot of people. You have their details, who has paid the loan, who has not paid the loan, that information also we have. So you just bring all this data and train it with mission. You just tell mission, a mission, see, this is the person, he is married and he has his own business and he has taken 3 lakhs but he did not pay. Next person, he is not married and he has taken loan of 1 lakh and he has paid. So all this information you are going to, it's just a kind of a informing to the mission, you are going to train it. Okay, so when you train this mission will understand, okay, these are the patterns we have. So all the married people are not able to make the payments, all unmarried people are able to make the payments, something like that. It is going to take a lot of patterns. Based on the algorithms, you'll get the results, but it is going to decide all those things. Once it is decided, so when you pass new data, from whatever it learned from the past data, with that data, it will try to give the answers for the current data. Currently, somebody is requesting for the loan. So whatever it has learned mission, with that knowledge, it will try to give result. It will try to tell, okay, this person you can grant the loan. The probability of paying back by this person is 90%. This person may pay like 51% chances we have that this person may pay this loan. So all the scoring also we can able to do. But now to train this mission, okay, to store this result, all these things, we need a data where we are going to put the data in a data management. Okay, see now in data management, first you can say Databricks file system. What is this Databricks file system? You see, a file system, we can able to store data in a different ways. Within a DBFS, we can store data in a different ways. One is Databricks file system, where we are going to store the files. Okay, Databricks file system, a file system abstraction layer over a blob store. Okay, basically it's a blob storage in backend. That's why it's an abstraction layer. It contains directories which can contain files, data files, libraries, images, and other directories. Maybe subdirectories you can have. That's what the meaning of other directories. DBFS is a automatically populated with some data sets that you can use to learn Databricks. So when you create DBFS, we'll have automatically some data set you can use to learn Databricks basically. Okay. That is nothing but a Databricks file system. Remember, by using Databricks file system, we are going to store only files. Now I want to store my data in a tables. Okay, for that, to store tables, first you need to create a database, a collection of information that is organized so that it can be easily accessed and managed and updated. So now I have a lot of tables. I want to maintain all these tables. Maybe you are dealing with stores, you are dealing with the sales, okay, you are dealing with orders. Then what you need to do, you need to maintain maybe different tables. Okay, so orders table you should have, stores table you should have, next transaction table you should have. Okay, all the sales, orders, all this information you want to keep it in a different tables. Now to organize these tables, okay, to easily accessible by these tables, to access these tables easily, what we are going to do, we are going to keep all these things in a database. Okay, this database data also going to store it in a same blob storage. Remember, whatever database you are creating, that database data also will store it in a blob storage. Okay, under database you can create the tables. Okay, this is the table where we are going to store our structured data. Okay, a representation of structured data, you query tables with the Apache Spark SQL and Apache Spark APIs. By using Spark, you can able to read the tables, you can able to create new tables, you can able to create new database. Whatever you want to do, you can able to do with the Spark SQL and the Spark other code as well. Okay, not only Spark SQL, directly you can use data frames to save the table as well. Okay, those things we've discussed, but ultimately data management we can store it in a DBFS database and the tables. Okay, finally we have a something called metastore. Metastore is nothing but a whatever code you are writing, that code also we need to store along with our data. Okay, this is all about your data, maybe customer information, sales information, orders information, all that data you may store it in a files. If it is a files, you can use Databricks file system. If it is a table, you can use the tables. Database is just to maintain these tables. Okay, now metastore is basically to keep all the metadata information. Okay, example, notebook information, notebook code information, everything. If I want to store, I need to have a metastore. This metastore is basically again going to store within a blob storage. Okay, see the component that stores all the structured information of the various tables, partitions in the database, including column types information, we need a metastore. Okay, you understood now. So if you have created any table with partitions, on what column you have created this partition. Okay, so what are the columns we have, so all that information also we need to store. That is nothing but a metastore. So to store metadata, we are going to use a metastore option, but basically this metastore also available within a blob storage. Okay, any
So
questions here?
can we create multiple databases within that DBFS?
Yes, you can create multiple. By default you will have a default database. If you want to create a other databases, you can able to create. Yes, we can connect to on-premise systems using Databricks.
So when you say Malaya, it creates a database, that's creates a SQL database, or what database it creates?
It's a Databricks database. Basically, it's not a SQL. See, when you create a SQL database, okay, or you can say server, in server you can create the multiple databases. In the same way, here in Databricks, to store structured data, we are going to create the database. It's not a SQL database that it is going to create. It is going to create database on top of the DBFS. That is nothing but on top of blob storage.
Okay. Okay. So it's like
Right, one thing. Don't think that storage means you can able to store only the files On top of storage, you can create the databases. Even data lake storage Gen 1, on top of that, you can able to create the database.
Okay. So it's like a blob storage with a table structure, something like that, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Blob storage with the table structure, you are right. Okay. Let me just move on. Okay, computation management. So this is also very, very important. Please focus on this. See.
Malaya, how about the unstructured data, something like JSON?
Those you can store it in a like a Databricks file system. Those are files, right? You can store it in Databricks file system. Clear?
Okay. Yeah, hi Malaya, just one question. So when we connect to the on-premise system, right, using Databricks, so we will have a separate copy, right, in under data, or I mean, we are directly connecting to on-premises. Like, just want to understand that.
No, separate. I did not understand. Separate means
So
what?
I mean, when we connect to on-premise system, right? Maybe SQL or like Hive to any of the system, right? So we will have a separate copy of the data. I mean, in Databricks, or it's just like we're directly connecting to a SQL server. We can access all those tables directly.
See, whatever tables we have in your on-premise or in Azure SQL database, all those things, those are different. Whatever databases tables you are creating in database, this is different. Okay. So when you are accessing on-premise SQL database, those tables will not come and available in a Databricks database. Okay. Those you are going to access from the on-premise itself. You are just going to read data from on-premise databases. That's all.
Okay. So we have to create all those, right? Okay. Okay. Thank you.
No problem. See, now cluster. Okay. A set of computational resources and configuration on which you run notebooks and jobs. Okay. Cluster, a set of computational resources. What is computational resources? Okay, where we are going to execute our code, we need some compute power, we need computers. What is computational resources? Because how all this process is going to happen with the help of power. Why we need like power to our laptops? Because in backend, internally, it is going to, you will have some wire. Okay, that wire is going to send some signal, whether this value is 0 or 1, whether this value is 0 or 1. So based on that, it is going to activate and deactivate, right? So that's how the computers will work. It is computers does not know anything else apart from zeros and ones. Okay, so for this, it is going to on and off the signals. Based on that, it will come to know whether it is sending 0 or 1. So that's how it is going to process your data. To process data, you need a computer. So if you are using set of computer, group of computers, okay, that is nothing but a cluster. Okay, now whatever Spark cluster you are going to create here, it's a computational resource. That is nothing but a computer which has the calculation power. Calculation power means it can able to process your data with the help of zeros and ones. Now, and in this particular computers, we are going to do something called configurations. Okay, and configurations on which you run notebooks and jobs. Okay. What kind of configurations we are going to keep it is, we are going to keep the configurations like whether I want to run my machine learning, then I want to configure my cluster to run a machine learning code. If I just want to execute small code, then that related configuration I need to set it. Okay, so those things I'll just explain in this slide only. You will get to know more clarity on that configurations. And remember, there are two types of clusters we have. One is all-purpose cluster. Second one is called a job cluster. In interview, this is very important. People will ask, how many types of clusters we have? Two types, all-purpose and a job cluster. Now we'll see. You create an all-purpose cluster using the UI CLI or REST API. Okay, first I'm talking about all-purpose cluster. So we are going to create the all-purpose cluster using the UI, CLI, REST API. Now you can manually terminate and restart an all-purpose cluster. Okay, I hope these all are self-explanatory. If you're not able to understand, please let me know. See, you are going to create all-purpose cluster by using these three interfaces. Any of these interfaces you can use, as we just discussed, UI, CLI, REST API. You can manually terminate and restart an all-purpose cluster, meaning you can delete, you can stop it, you can able to restart it. Anything you can able to do this particular cluster. On this cluster, you can perform deletion, termination. Terminate is nothing but just a stop. After stop, you can able to start it again. But delete means completely you are going to delete that configuration itself. That cluster configuration itself you are deleting. Configuration means, again, I'm repeating, configuration means you are going to set what type of cluster you want. You want a cluster which is going to execute your machine learning. You want a cluster which is going to create some complex, let's say you want to handle your biomedical data. So for that you have a different configurations. Okay, those things, cluster configurations you need to set up. Okay, that I will show you. Now once the cluster setup is available, you have created, you can able to create two types of cluster. One is all-purpose cluster, job cluster. All-purpose cluster we can able to create by using UI, CLI, REST API, and this particular all-purpose cluster you can delete, terminate, restart, anything you can able to perform on this all-purpose cluster. Next, multiple users can share such clusters to do collaborative interactive analysis. Let's say multiple people, meaning my colleague is there, I am there, my team lead is there. We three are working on three different notebooks, three different functionalities. We three can able to use same cluster to execute our three types of code. Understood? We can able to use same cluster to execute our three notebooks. Okay, that is nothing but all-purpose cluster. Now we'll talk about job cluster. Try to understand. Databricks job scheduler creates a job cluster. There is no chance you don't have any access to create job cluster. Job cluster will be created by Databricks job scheduler. It is going to create the cluster, but when it is going to create, let's see. When you run a job on new job cluster and terminates the cluster when the job is completed, what happens? You are going to schedule the job. When you schedule the job, that is up to you. You want to create a job, you want to run this particular job on a new cluster, that is nothing but on a job cluster, or you want to run it on a all-purpose cluster. You can have the choice to select. When you select a job cluster will be created by Databricks job scheduler automatically. It will create the cluster, it will execute our code, and it will terminate the cluster immediately. It will delete the cluster immediately. Okay, that's why you don't have any control on the job cluster. You cannot restart a job cluster. Okay, now you may ask, what is the use case when I will use all-purpose cluster, when I will use job cluster? Same notebooks can be accessed by multiple people in the team. Yes, same notebook can be accessed by multiple people in the team. You also came to know that who all accessed this notebook. Here it will show. Okay, so Malay is accessing, Cloud Pandit is accessing, all that information you can able to see. When you open this, if somebody opened here, so that person name also it will show you here. Okay, let me just try it in this. But in Azure Databricks,
so can they run the notebooks at the same time as well?
We see here. So something it is showing. What it is saying? C. Understood? Here you have C again. What is the reason? You see, if I close this, if I close one, that C is gone. You understood the reason? Because Cloud Pandit already is working on this, you are also working. That's why it has shown C here. Okay, I hope everybody observed. Now you say again, I'm opening duplicate. So now if I open 2 times, it will tell you, okay, Cloud Pandit already using this notebook. So that option will C is coming. You just put your cursor here, it will show you what is this. From here, see cloudpandit@gmail.com. From here, you can see cloudpandit@gmail. Okay, so Cloud Pandit is accessing. Suppose another user, another colleague is accessing this, then that person name will show here. Okay, you will come to know who all accessing this particular notebook. Okay, clear? I don't know who is asking this. Arun, clear?
Yeah, Mike, thank you.
I have a question regarding job cluster. Say a job is scheduled, it's a daily job and scheduled at 9 a.m. every day.
Okay.
So when the job is scheduled to run at 9 a.m., it automatically creates the job scheduler, and it runs that executes, and it close. Once it completes, it's closed. And say following day, does it create again a job scheduler and run?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm going to tell you. Use case you will come to know now. You see, when you look at the all-purpose cluster, what you are doing, you need to create it. So like you don't have any other person to create this. Okay, now you have a use case where you want to run your job every day at 9 a.m. as you mentioned, but my job may run for 1 hour or 2 hours. Okay, it doesn't matter for me. This is the use case, one of the use case. Now in this case, which one is the better? If you look at the all-purpose cluster, what happens in all-purpose cluster is it is going to execute, it is going to be available for 24 hours just to execute 2 hours job. Okay, just to execute 2 hours of job. But if you look at the job scheduler, it will just come on time. Okay, it's a very busy doctor. He will come to the hospital, he will do some operation and he will leave. Okay, so he will just go to another hospital and he will do his job again. So that's how on demand, you just get the cluster, execute your job and finish it. Bring, like you have any other requirement, just to create a new job cluster, execute it and leave it. So now the cost will reduce if you use the job cluster instead of all-purpose cluster. When you have a requirement where you need to execute your job every day once. Otherwise, you have another requirement where you want to execute your job for every 15 minutes. So now job cluster is not recommended, all-purpose cluster is recommended. What is the reason behind this is, when you look at every 15 minutes means you already created a cluster is already available. Every 15 minutes means every 15 minutes immediately it will start running the job on all-purpose cluster. But if you select job cluster, every 15 minutes it is going to create a new cluster, meaning to create a new cluster again it will take 5 minutes, meaning in 15 minutes 5 minutes will be waste for creating the cluster, and it will just run your job and it will terminate unnecessarily. Lot of clusters will create and terminate, it will increase the cost again. Okay, and you are not running the jobs on time, because in every job you are going to wait for 5 minutes to create a new job cluster. So when you have a frequently executing jobs, you need to go for the all-purpose cluster. If you have very rarely 1 or 2 times daily I want to run a job, then you need to go with the job cluster. And all-purpose cluster we are going to use it in development environment, because we will not have job cluster to execute our own code to test. Clear?
So what if job fails with some bad data, and we have fixed the data, and can we restart the job cluster?
Job cluster you cannot restart, you are going to create the new job cluster.
Okay, and we need to again reprogram to schedule at 9 a.m. To run again every day?
No, every day you don't need to schedule. One day if you schedule, you have a reoccurrence. Every day 9 o'clock it will keep running. Okay, if you have any issue, if you fix it today evening, tomorrow at 9 o'clock it will run and it will be successful.
Okay, if it fails on particular day with bad data, you are fixing it and you have to recreate the cluster and run. Is that correct?
Yes, you are right. But yeah, you are right. But again, I am just clarifying. You are not going to create it. You are going to schedule it. Automatically, it will create. Databricks job scheduler will create job list.
Yeah, Malay, I have a scenario. Like in same workspace, I have two notebooks. Okay, I need to run these two notebooks at a time. Okay,
Okay.
so whether these two notebooks are shared the same job cluster, whichever it's created, or separate job clusters.
Separate job cluster will be created for both.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Malay, I have one question. So in the notebook, we don't have the version control concept, right?
No, we have.
So say, I mean, multiple people can modify the same notebook at the same time.
Yes, here you have.
Got it.
You
Okay.
come to know we have modified.
Okay. So okay, with different ID, if people log in, they both can modify at the same time, and it shows which version we have it. Okay, got it. And we can execute the same notebook by different IDs.
Same notebook. So what happens? Same notebook. If you are trying to execute, it is not possible because if the notebook is currently running, if you open it, it will say notebook still executing. It will show. It will not allow you to run.
Okay, but I can modify, but I cannot. Multiple people cannot run the same notebook.
Yes, yes. At
Okay.
same time, you can execute multiple people, but at same time you cannot.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on. Now you see we have this is a cluster. Next we have something called pool. This is also very important, but this is basically used to maintain some of the clusters that I will explain now. You see, somebody will ask what is the pool in Databricks, right? So pool is not a. Yeah, tell me, somebody is asking. Okay, fine. So pool is nothing but a. See, what you are going to do, you are going to maintain the computers. Let's say now you have a cluster, all-purpose cluster. Maybe you set the inactive time for 15 minutes. Then what happens is all the clusters did not receive the job for next 15 minutes, so all computers shut down. Now when you restart the cluster, how much time it will take? Again it is going to take some 5 to 10 minutes to create the new cluster, isn't it? It is going to create 5 to 10 minutes to create the new cluster. To avoid that, we have something called pool. So pool means even though computers is shut down from the cluster, you keep running in the pool. So whenever you need, you can take it from the pool to your cluster. Now if the pool is not maintaining enough computers, then if you request on demand, pool will get the new resources from the cloud provider. Example, we are taking Azure Databricks, so all the computers we can get it from the Azure. Okay, now you see the instance pools API allows you to create, edit, delete, and list instance pools. Okay, instance pools means all instance is nothing but a computer, one node, one computer. Okay, instance pools means pool. Okay, group of computers. Now you see, you can create a group of computers, you can edit, you can delete. Okay, you can list all the group of computers, you can maintain all those group of computers in the pool. What is the advantage? A set of ideal ready to use instances that reduce cluster start and auto scaling times. So when you have already running computers in the pool, it will reduce the time for starting the cluster, because cluster starting means you are starting all the computers. But if the computers already those are started, which are started computers available in the pool, then basically those we can able to use to create the cluster. So when you say create cluster or when you start the cluster, so what happens, it will quickly start your cluster because already computers are available. You're just using these computers to you are just using these computers within your cluster. Next, When attached to a pool, a cluster allocates its driver worker nodes from the pool. Don't worry, this is a Spark architecture, you should know. So driver or worker, both are a computers. Okay. So this computers
one
will
quick
be
question,
allocated from the pool.
Malaya, on your previous point on the set of idle piece. So whenever we start a cluster, we already would be mentioning that how many nodes are there and all these things, right? So typically that by that itself, we know if it is like a 4 node, 8 node or whatever. So in that case, are you saying with the second point that even though I am having 4 node cluster, based on the requirement of the auto scaling, it might add up 2 more, make it 6 and run? Or those 4 would gonna be chosen by the corresponding smart infrastructure of Spark to give
You
the
are
corresponding.
Wait. See, I'll just give you some example. Now, in every organization, we will have a bench. Why people are maintaining in bench? Because if they go to market and if they try to get the employees, so it will be very difficult for them on the fly. Because on same day, if they want to get 10 resources, it is very difficult. They will conduct the interviews, but people may not join. So they have already work ready. So what is the problem now? So they need to delay. They need to delay the project. So there will be impact on the organization. To avoid that, what they are doing, they are going to put some bench period. In the same way, whatever computers we have, okay, we are going to use them. But sometimes when there is no work, when there is no project, we are going to leave these computers. But what we are saying is, don't leave these computers. Okay, just send those computers to your pool. Pool will maintain those computers. When you need these computers again, you just, instead of going and searching for these computers from the cloud provider, you just take this computer from the pool. It will be easy for you to start your cluster, because now you want to start a new project. You already have resources on bench. You can just quickly get them to work on a project instead of searching in your market. You understood? That's how we are going to use the pool. Pool is going to maintain all the computers which you are not using in the cluster. Those will be available in the pool. So when you need again, pool will give you those computers. Understood?
Yeah, maybe
Clear?
when we see the example, we will get more. I will park for till that for my questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Rest of the people understood, friends?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
Malaya.
Yes,
Okay,
Malay.
yeah, Malaya. Okay.
Malaya,
So, I
same
mean,
thing. We see
okay.
that there's a lot of theories coming, but whereas the actual options, that is when we will see, we'll get it more.
See, you have pool option here as well. Oh, I think we don't have here pool option, but in Azure Databricks we will have it. We will have a pool option. Okay. So to see that, I'll just quickly do you something.
One more thing, Malaya. So when we are running this job, then I'm using this pool option, or like, I mean, is it like 24 hours? I'm going to use it.
1 second, I just explain. See here, pool. You understood? Here you have something called pool. You see here, pool. What this pool is doing, you are just saying, I want to create a cluster with a group of computers. Those computers, I want to get it from this pool. Already this pool is one option where we are going to maintain this particular computers. From the pool you are getting. See, I have given better example. If you're not able to understand from that better example, it is difficult, friends. As I mentioned, it's exactly like a bench. In organization, we have a bench. So even though you don't have work, okay, so from the project you released, from the cluster, computer is released, but that computer we are not going to send it out of our organization. We are going to keep that person in a bench. In the same way, whatever computer is released from the cluster, those computers we will maintain in the pool. Again, when you get a new project, you are going to take the resource from the bench. In the same way, when cluster needs a computer, this is going.
Malaya, I think what I'm just confused with is that infrastructure, like like putting more efforts on identifying this infrastructure it's an headache for whoever is developing. He need not to be even bothered about whether I am getting that computer, that node particularly from pool, from elsewhere, from other places, because here it's not an example like I need this resource who's in bench. I know he works well. It's not like that. I don't care about which node I'm using, which machine I'm using, and until unless the cluster is spun up, I'm not going to incur cost also. So why need to be aware on this particular part? That's where my concern is.
Okay, see, let's say how much time it is taking to create the to start the cluster if you don't have a pool. If you don't have a pool, see, example, very simple example, I will ask you, you need to search a person from the market for your project. How much time it will take?
It will take quite a good amount of time, provided that it is basically I need that skill. But there is nothing like this, right? I need just a worker. I just need a one node. So why do I care? I need this skill, that skill, doesn't matter.
Skill doesn't matter, but same person. So you just simply you will give the job, like you will just give the job for anybody who is coming with coming for you. See, even though if first thing, okay, let's see, you are saying you are right. So I don't care about skill. Okay, that's okay. You don't need to worry about skill, but you need to get somebody into your organization. Will somebody will come just come tomorrow? Will he come immediately? No, right? But if the person is already on bench, if you say, hey, please come and join in this project tomorrow, he will come. Doesn't matter here also skill set, but just you are saying, hey, just come and join. In the same way, pool will have a computers, so which will we are going to use those computers in a cluster. What happens if you use these computers is cluster start time will reduce. If you're not using these computers from the pool, nothing is going to happen. You are going to run the job, but cluster start time will increase. More time it will take.
But how would I select this pool? Like, how would I know which computers to select in the pool?
You don't need to worry. You just say, take the compute from the pool. So from the pool, it will take all the computers. So let's say in pool, you have 10 computers. So cluster, what it will do, it will try to take all the 10. But now the pool also don't have, now cluster require 20 computers, but pool has only 10. Now what happens, pool will go and get 10 more computers from the cloud provider. And now we'll have it 20 computers from the pool. From the pool, cluster will consume those computers. If you're not using pool, what will happen? Now cluster, every time it should go to the cloud provider and it should identify the computers, it should start those computers. But if you use pool, pool already got the computers and it started already 10 computers, you can use those 10 computers in your cluster.
This extra advantage, that's it, nothing else.
Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's
Yeah,
what
so
I was
Malaya,
saying.
that means, I mean, if my job takes 20 minutes overall without the pool, right? And if I select pool option, so my job will take maybe only 10 minutes, right? Because I have a pool.
So if you give the example, but reality, it will not take minutes. It will just take 1 or 2 minutes if you use pool. If you're not using pool, it will take 5 to 6 minutes.
Okay. Because cluster starting takes 7 to 10 minutes, correct? So if I go for pool option, so I mean minus that time, right?
Yes, it will reduce that. Okay.
Time. Okay.
See, when
it
attached
is
to your
computation power. Yeah, Malaya, what I understand that it is not the computation power that gets increased. It is only the procurement power, that how fast it can get the VMs to create a cluster. That is only gets improved, which improves the starting time of the cluster.
Yes. Okay. Yes. So just a starting time will.
Malaya, can you go back to that image once? Whatever you showed.
Which one?
The pool one which you showed just now. So I just wanted to clarify one thing. The Google image which you showed, regarding the pool. So once you select the pool, the other things will automatically get populated. You don't need to select all those things, the workers and everything.
Yes.
yeah, the worker type and everything. If you use that particular machine already once, okay, and you selected pool, and once you select the pool, the bottom of all worker type and driver type will automatically get populated.
Yes, yes, automatically those will be populated. Okay.
Okay.
The clusters which are in pool, are they active always?
Yeah, that's what. Those will be activate. There also you can put some inactive time. Okay. So cluster inactive time is 15 minutes. After 15 minutes, all these computers will be released from the cluster and those will come back to the pool. In the pool, I will run for next 15 minutes. Okay. So in next 15 minutes, if somebody needs these computers, I will just pass those computers to that particular cluster. If none of the clusters is requesting for these computers, from the pool also, I will shut down those computers. Okay, clear? Okay. If the pool does not have sufficient idle resources, see, if the pool does not have sufficient idle resources, pool doesn't have, let's say cluster require 20 computers, but the pool is having only 10 computers. Okay. Now, pool, what it will do to accommodate the cluster request, the pool expands by allocating new instances from the instance provider. That is from the Microsoft Azure. From the VM options, it will create some virtual machines and it will get those computers. Okay. Next, when an attached cluster is terminated, okay, you terminated this cluster, the instances it used are returned to the pool. Those are released from the cluster. Those computers will come back to the pool. Okay, return to the pool and can be reused by different clusters. Whatever computers we have in the pool, those may be used by some other clusters also. Let's say you start a new cluster, so that new cluster also may consume the computers from this pool. Okay. Next, we have a job, a non-interactive mechanism for running a notebook or library either immediately or on schedule basis. Okay, so if you want to run it on demand immediately, if you want to run, you can just click on run now, or if you want to run it on it based on some schedule, you can able to do that. Okay, clear? Any questions in this particular slide?
Yeah, Malaya, only Microsoft Azure will provide the pool, right? The Databricks itself, it's not providing, right?
No, I think that option is available everywhere. That pool option will be available everywhere. See, Databricks is nothing but it's a Databricks team is developed. Okay, so same functionalities will have everywhere.
Oh.
Okay, clear?
Yeah.
One quick question: pool can only be for job clusters, open all purpose, or both?
You did not understand the concept then. What job cluster again? Job cluster is created on the fly by the job scheduler.
Correct.
So all purpose cluster will have the cluster which we are going to create. Whatever cluster
Correct.
we are creating, that will be that cluster will consume the computers from the pool.
Okay. So job cluster don't have any such configuration to maintain, to mention or anything.
Yes.
Okay.
So, but if you want to refer pool in job cluster, you need to change those things in the job scheduling. Okay. So I will show you that part. You need to make some changes when you are scheduling the job to use pool. But that is not because as per the use case, that is not recommended for job cluster.
Okay. Why?
Because let's say you are going to run every day at once, just to provide these computers, active computers to my job cluster. If you keep running 23 hours ideally without using anything, you are keep running 23 hours computers. That is not required, right? So that's why that is not suitable. Okay.
Malaya, can you explain that again? What did you say? I didn't get it. The last point.
Which point you want?
No, you just explained something. It's not recommended like for 23 hours. Can you explain that again, please?
You have 24 hours. Pool means you are maintaining the active computers in the pool. Just to provide these computers to the cluster, Okay, so that cluster can start quickly. Now job cluster is going to create on the fly. If the job cluster is going to consume this particular computers from the pool, now what happens is job cluster will create maybe daily once to run at 9 o'clock job. Just to provide the computers for this job cluster, you are going to run unnecessarily these computers for 23 hours. So entire purpose of job cluster you are going to destroy.
But Malaya, whenever we don't have sufficient resources, then only it will look for pool, right? Otherwise, it will take its own resource only, right?
From pool it will take complete computers. If the pool does not have, then it will go and get it from the instance provider. First cluster will get the computers from the pool.
So if specifically mention pool, it's automatically every time it is automatically taking pool itself.
Do you want to take the clusters from the computer or not, from the pool or not? You need to specify. That's what this image is showing, right? So you have any pool, from which pool you want to get the computers. That's what you need to mention.
Yeah, now it's clarified. Yeah.
And that means I'll be I'll be billed for 23 hours when I'm not even using it, right? For 1 hour job, right?
Yes.
If I go for pool option, okay.
Yes, that's what.
Got it. Okay. And when it is actually recommended to use pool, like what kind of job? In what scenario?
I just explained already, so I don't know. Like it is difficult for me to explain every time like this, because I just explained you the use case. Okay, if you want, anyhow, I'm going to share the recordation just to go through the recorded sessions. If you still have any question, you come up tomorrow, because again, or not possible. So because if you have any doubt after going through the recordings, I can able to help you, but same thing I cannot repeat multiple times, friends, in same session. Okay. Any other questions you have? Okay, if no questions, that's all for today, friends. Thank you.